한국어능력시험 Test of Proficiency in Korean. 쓰기 53번 Graph Interpretation. Hello everybody and thank you very much for tuning in to my channel. Today we will be discussing item number 53 of the writing examination portion of the Test of Proficiency in Korean, and we will be discussing specifically graph interpretation. Let's start. So for today, we will be discussing item number 53 of the writing examination portion of the Test of Proficiency in Korean, which was the 47th topic. So before anything else, we have to understand the totality of this graph and the information thereunto before we provide the graph interpretation in Korean. Please bear with me as I am not a native Korean speaker, so I might have a different pronunciation of the Korean words and phrases. Nonetheless, I will be doing my best to pronounce them, and I will be doing my best also to explain them to you in English. Okay, let's start. 다음을 참고하여 국내 외국인 유학생 영왕에 대한 글을 200에서 300자로 쓰십시오. 단 글의 제목을 쓰지 마십시오. 30점. Please refer to the following and interpret the graph and other information about the current status of foreign students in Korea in 200 to 300 characters. However, do not write the title of the article. Actually, item number 53 of the writing examination portion of the Test of Proficiency in Korean will require you to interpret this graph and the information that was provided using a Korean paragraph, basically, in 200 to 300 characters. Now, in front of us here is about the current status or situation of foreign students in Korea. So that is where we will start. 외국인, 유학생, 형왕. Current status or situation of foreign students in Korea. 유학생 수의 변화. Changes in the number of international students. So we can see here that in the year 2000, it started with 4,000명, 4,000 people or students. And then, in 2016, 10만 명, 100,000 people or students. So coming from those information, we can see that from 4,000 students to 100,000 students, there was an increase in the number of students. Here on the right side are other information that will be helpful in our interpretation. 증가 원인, reason or cause for the increase. The first reason, 1번. 한국, 한국어에 대한 관심, interest in Korea and the Korean language. 2번. 한국 대학의 유학생 유치 노력. Efforts of Korean universities to attract international students. And then we also have another portion here which will be giving you the future expectation. What do we expect if this current situation continues? 외국인 유학생 20만 명, 200,000 international students, 2023년, by the year 2023. Now that we have understood this information, let us learn some vocabulary that will be able to help you not only in this problem but in the future problems that you may also encounter. Let's read them one by one. 국내, domestic. 외국인, foreigner. 유학생, international student. 현황, 현재 상황, current situation. 수, number. 변화, change. 증가, increase. 원인, reason or cause. 관심, interest. 유치, attract. 노력, effort, 기대, expectation. These words will be helpful for you to fully understand the content of the graph. Now let's start constructing the graph interpretation and to answer 53번 문제. Step 1. Write an opening sentence that introduces the agency who conducted the study, investigation, survey, or research. Also, provide information about the target people of the survey or research and the main topic of the investigation at hand. The opening sentence looks like this. Agency, 기관에서. Target people, 대상, 을 or 를 대상으로. Topic, 주제에 대해 조사를 하였다. Now in this problem, we don't have any agency that is in the problem or the 기관. We also don't have any target people or the 대상. So we will immediately start with the topic. The topic is this one. 국내 외국인 유학생 현황. So we can construct the first opening sentence like this. 국내 외국인 유학생 영향에 대해 조사를 하였다. In English, it means an investigation was conducted about the current status of foreign students in Korea. That will be your first sentence. Now that you have introduced what we are talking about in this interpretation or for your answer in 53번, we now proceed to the next portion. Explain the contents of the main graph pertaining to the topic under consideration. Since we are talking about this, we have to give an introduction also to the readers that, okay, this is the part that I will now be discussing. So, we will be doing it like this. Open your sentence with the phrase, 조사 결과에 따르면, meaning, according to the results of the investigation. Provide information about the graph that you will be interpreting. In this case, it's this one. 유학생 수의 변화. So the phrase that you will be writing is 유학생 수의 변화는. What will be the interpretation of the paragraph? In English, it will sound like this. In the year 2000, the number of international students is 4,000. In 2016, the number of international students is 100,000. There was also a slight decrease at a certain time. Now, this is very important. This graph should not be interpreted as a constant or continuous increase, since there was a time where there was a little decrease before it increased again. And we can see that here. There was a slight decrease before it increased again. So it should not be interpreted as a constant or continuous increase. Now, putting these informations all together, let's construct the interpretation of the main graph. 조사 결과에 따르면 유학생 수의 변화는 2000년 4,000명에서 꾸준히 증가하다가 소폭 감소했으며 꾸준히 is constantly. 증가하다, increase. 감소하다, decrease. Big, in effect, 대폭. Small, in effect, 소폭. After that, 2016년 10만 명까지 다시 증가한 것으로 나타났다. 다시, again, 나타나다, to appear. Let's now combine all of these phrases to construct the interpretation of the main graph. 조사 결과에 따르면 유학생 수의 변화는 2000년 4,000명에서 꾸준히 증가하다가 소폭 감소했으며 2016년 10만 명까지 다시 증가한 것으로 나타났다. In English, it means like this. According to the results of the investigation, the change in the number of international students constantly increased from the year 2000, with 4,000 students, with a slight decrease before increasing again to 100,000 students in the year 2016. Again, 조사 결과에 따르면 유학생 수의 변화는 2000년 4,000명에서 꾸준히 증가하다가 소폭 감소했으며 2016년 10만 명까지 다시 증가한 것으로 나타났다. Then we proceed to the next step. Explain the reasons behind the results of the investigation. In this case, what are the reasons for the increase of international students? We start with 이러한 증가의 원인은. The reasons for the increase in international students are 한국과 한국에 대해 대한 관심이 있기 때문이며 because of the interest in Korea and the Korean language. And 한국 대학이 유학생 유치를 위해 노력했기 때문인 것으로 나타났다. The effort of universities in Korea in order to attract international students. So, we will now be explaining the reasons behind the increase of international students. And it says here that the reasons are the interest in Korea and the Korean language, and the effort of the universities in Korea to attract international students. Let's now combine these phrases to make the interpretation or explanation of the increase in international students. It will be like this. 이러한 증가의 원인은 한국과 한국어에 대한 관심이 있기 때문이며 한국 대학이 유학생 유치를 위해 노력했기 때문인 것으로 나타났다. In English, it's like this. The reasons for the increase are because of the interest of international students in Korea and the Korean language, and also because of the efforts of universities in Korea to attract international students. So, we're already done with the explanation of this, and we're ready to proceed to the next part. The future expectation. Close the graph interpretation paragraph by providing information about future expectations if the current situation continues. It will be like this. 이러한 상황이 계속되면, if this situation continues, so 상황 is situation and 계속 is continue. 외국인 유학생은 2023년에 20만 명이 될 것으로 예상된다. It is expected that the number of international students by the year 2023 becomes 200,000 students. 되다 is to become, and 예상 is expectation. Let's again combine these phrases to make the last sentence. It will be like this. 이러한 상황이 계속되면 외국인 유학생은 2023년에 20만 명이 될 것으로 예상된다. If this situation continues, it is expected that the number of international students by the year 2023 becomes 200,000 students. And we're now done interpreting the whole or the totality of this graph. Let's now construct the whole graph interpretation. I will be reading them in Korean first and then in English. 국내 외국인 유학생 영향에 대해 조사를 하였다. 조사 결과에 따르면 유학생 수의 변화는 2000년 4,000명에서 꾸준히 증가하다가 소폭 감소했으며 2016년 10만 명까지 다시 증가한 것으로 나타났다. 이러한 증가의 원인은 한국과 한국에 대한 관심이 있기 때문이며 한국 대학이 유학생 유치를 위해 노력했기 때문인 것으로 나타났다. 이러한 상황이 계속되면 외국인 유학생은 2023년에 30만 명이 될 것으로 예상된다. Sorry, this is 20만 명. This is 20만 명. An investigation was conducted about the current status of foreign students in Korea. According to the results of the investigation, the change in the number of international students constantly increased from the year 2000 with 4,000 students, with a slight decrease before increasing again to 100,000 students in the year 2016. The reasons for the increase are because of the interest of international students in Korea in the Korean language, and also because of the efforts of universities in Korea to attract international students. If this situation continues, it is expected that the number of international students by the year 2023 becomes 200,000 students. And now that you have already completed the whole graph interpretation, you can now easily write it in the item number 53 portion in the answer sheet of the Test of Proficiency in Korean, and it will be something that looks like this. Okay, so I hope that you understood today's session, and thank you very much for listening. Again, this is Graph Interpretation for Segi 53번. 감사합니다.